to Matt Scheckner and the whole team at Advertising Week for all their help, and they just do a phenomenal job putting the whole event on year in, year out, so we're just really thrilled to be here. As most people probably already know, the creative community and the advertising industry in particular has been a real important area of focus for Adobe, really since our inception. But just as the agency community is kind of evolving and today, dealing with how to build brands in a much more complex multi-screen environment, Adobe is also evolving. So moving from just content creation solutions to content delivery and optimization solutions. And so our take is that working with our agency partners, the opportunity for creativity and profit is greater today than it ever has been in the advertising world. And so we're going to dig into those topics a little bit here with the panel. So with that, I just want to introduce our moderator for today. It's Jason Witt, Senior Vice President and General Manager from MySpace Studio.
Thank you. Could we turn up the lights in the back? I'm just kidding. I'm going to get a migraine. So thank you guys for coming out here. I was actually nervous about 2 minutes ago. It looked like there were going to be 10 people, and I thought we could just go get drinks. But now we probably can't. So, and since I'm going to forget, there's a really cool Panasonic 3D thing happening after the show. I'll never remember. Yeah. We think it's all going to be really cool. The other thing is, so in preparing for this panel, I guess, the guys on stage said that they have so much information that they didn't even want to introduce themselves. So I'm going to try to do that. I gave them a 2-sentence opportunity to describe themselves. In a couple cases, their PR people did it. So let me start from my right. Steve Nestle from Deutsch. Steve Nestle, pronounced Nestle, is the Executive Vice President, Executive Creative Director at Deutsch New York, where he is charged with developing the agency's digital practice, as well as integrating digital thinking into all of Deutsch's accounts from PNC Bank to Microsoft. Steve's a veteran digital creative, and he's held executive creator positions at Tribal, Modem, McCann, and Digitas. Hello. I have Michael Leibowitz next to me, who founded and is the CEO of Big Spaceship. He's asked me to cut this short, but he did get a Primetime Emmy Award nomination. To my left...
It was creative arts, not primetime.
To my left, Dave Schiff from Crispin Porter. Dave started his advertising career 8 years ago as a copywriter at Crispin Porter, and in 2003 was promoted to creative director on Coca-Cola Zero, where he helped engineer the Coca-Cola company's most successful new product launch in more than 20 years. Dave had a Detroit to DC journey on an electric motorcycle, and that was the subject of a highly successful Shocking Barack viral campaign for the Oregon-based EV manufacturer Bramo. And
I've also been to 5 different county jails in 3 different states, including Queens Central Booking here in Kew Gardens. I don't know why the PR people didn't.
No, it's not on the paper. That has to be said. You don't put that on the paper.
Dave made me feel a lot better about what I'm wearing. So,
That's cool.
So, Philippe Mignot.
Good, you're good.
Yeah, he told me. But Chief Creative Officer and Founder at Sid Lee. Philip, actually, right? I'm
Philip,
Philippe,
yeah.
but yeah. So he and a high school buddy founded Sid Lee 18 years ago, built in part on a multi-platform approach defined as commercial creativity. You now have offices in Paris, Amsterdam, and Toronto. And as the senior partner and creative chief, Philip oversees all creative chef. It is chef.
It is chef.
Master chef. Philip oversees all creative output for all major international clients, including Red Bull, Cirque du Soleil, and Adidas. Anything to add? No, it's beautiful. And last but not least, Tom, look at this, it still took a long time. Tom O'Keefe from Draft FCB, Tom's boss, Jonathan Harris, once described him as a malcontent. And while he's still not sure if he meant it as a good or a bad thing, Tom does everything he can live up to that every day. It's very nice. As Draft FCB's Executive Creative Director for North America, Tom is committed to raising Draft FCB's profile within the agency's 6.5 seconds that matter operating system. And perhaps you'll have 6.5 seconds to describe him. Done. So,
how long do I have?
You're over. So I wanted to start this off. It's funny. I could tell the kind of panel I was on. I sent out a bunch of questions, and the initial response was that it's too structured, and then I sent out a revised set of questions, and I heard today it really wasn't structured enough. So we know we're in the right room. So I'm going to start with, I think, a broad-based question, but there was a lot of discussion about sub-bullets, and hopefully folks will talk. At the end of the day, my piece is sort of done now with the next 15 minutes, and you're probably really here to hear what these folks are saying, what their opinions are, and really to hear them react to each other, and I'm going to try to facilitate that as much as possible. So really the starting question, and this is for Steve, is we had a debate where the name of the panel's 21st Century Creatives, and we had a debate as to what a creative was. And so I'm going to start with Steve on that one. It's 2010. What does a creative do or look like?
That's a really dumb question. Creatives look like us. No. First of all, I feel like I'm in a Pottery Barn window.
Is there any way to turn the lights down? It's like we're being interrogated. We have ways of making people talk.
So the question was, can you all hear me? What does a creative do? I think a creative does in the 21st century what they've always done, and that is to solve business problems. That's the boring answer. But I think that because we're all here and we have a sort of a digital slant to us, I think the key thing to think about is what a creative does is less about solving business problems with advertising, but solving business problems using an unimaginable amount of tools, be it media, be it software, be it promotions and events. So it's less about, okay, give the advertising brief to the advertising creative. It's more about give them the business problem and see what they can look at. What do you think? Do you agree?
I think it's a dumb question too. You directed
I'm
me.
next, man. Come on. No, go ahead.
I think it's a dumb question because I don't think there is a creative that's capable of doing what we all have to do. I think you have to have a department that has digital infrastructure and has people that are great at coming up with big ideas. And those are if you can find a whole bunch of people that can do both, awesome, but really you need both. And so I think if you can have a confluence of those two things, that's what a creative department looks like. I don't believe that there's just a singular creative that you can get a group of and make great stuff.
I'll go you one further. I don't think that anybody should have creative in their title at all, and I think it's a pox on this industry that people are referred to as the creatives, as though everybody else is absolved of the responsibility of creativity. It also creates that horrible stereotype of the creative director, the Don Draper. That I'm the font from which all creativity spills, and it's ludicrous. We don't have anybody in Big Spaceship with creative in their title, and we never will. Well, never say never. We cannot foresee having it because creativity is cost of entry. I think what's really interesting is surrounding problems with lots of perspectives. When things operated a little bit more linearly, you could have departments. But having departments now slows you down, and we're in, at best, a low latency world, and in more realistically, a real-time world, and there's no time for departments. And so a creative department is a negative in my book. It means you can't solve the problems without hurling things over a fence to the next people in line.
I would say, though, somebody has to pull it together, and I think that creative, every agency, of course, everybody should be creative. We've heard that, but I think what the creatives do is bring it together and realize it. And what their job is what it's always been, which is to turn it into something that's inspiring, that makes people go, I didn't see that coming, and what is commerce becomes more than that. And yeah, everybody has the ability to come up with an idea, but I still think that creatives are the ones who, somebody's got to own, getting that to become a product. And creative is both, what we refer to the work, as well as what we refer to the people who are ultimately responsible for creating that, I think it's important to have that signal, that this is about the work, this is about the stuff at the end, and this is what we do.
So then, aren't the production companies the creatives by that definition? Because they're the ones that actually bring it into the world.
Yeah, when they do their part of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
When they realize it. And
But-
I always think of production companies as being part of the creative.
I think we're asking ourselves the question for a creative person. On my side, I believe that in the future, there's no only one creative person, it's a creative attitude of a company. And for me, being creative in the future is being creative driven as a company. It makes a big difference at the end. And Michael, you're right when you say there's no creative at Big Spaceship because you're creative driven. And that's the attitude of the company. That makes a big difference at the end of the day. So if you're starting working in an agency, whatever you do, if you have the attitude of being creative, that makes it different.
That's right. We say if you're not creative, you can't work here. And I mean, we really put our money where our mouth is, and I completely agree with you. It's about culture. Digital, everybody talks about digital as though it's a practice or a channel, and what it is a cultural shift. It's a cultural shift that goes from predictable, linear, static platform to unpredictable, hurtling forward at massive velocity and wildly fragmented. And the whole idea of one group being able to solve every problem, or especially one department being able to solve problems, or even just bring solutions together by themselves, to me seems, sort of like it may work for a little while longer, but probably not very long.
And I just to add to that, it's all about confluence is what I'm hearing. And you guys, more digitally steeped, but adding traditional capability. And I think we come from the other side where we started off traditional and we're adding more digital. And just as you've tried to remove or have said no one's going to be called a creative, we stopped saying, well, this is a digital copywriter or this is a digital art director. And it's the same thing. And it all comes down to a group of people that are all capable of doing several things. And we just have always said the best idea is boss, So if somebody has an idea and they happen to be, this person or that person, it doesn't matter. The org chart is adjusted per idea if you have a big idea that can be driven through strategy and advance the cause of a brand.
So, there are a lot of different definitions then of what, or non-definitions of what a creative is, but let me go back then a step, which is your clients, you're only creative to the extent or delivering a service to the extent that the clients have asked you to do so, right? And so the definition of what it should look like in some ways has to follow what you're being asked to deliver. Was it Tom who said, 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, it was about filling the space, and now it's about something different. What are you being asked to do that allows you to sort of give the varying responses, and how does that differ from being asked to fill the space, let's say 10 years ago?
Well, I don't know if I said filling the space, but I'll take that.
The juniors?
No, I'll say, I think the difference is, like when at least when I started, it was about, the story. I mean, advertising and brands are about stories, but when I started, it was about telling that story. It was about a beginning and a middle and an end and an arc, and it was about the emotion of that was the message. And I think now there is just as much, if not more, opportunity where the actual messenger is that story. It's how you're applying it. What makes people go, holy shit, is the technology sometimes, or how cool it is to be able to, tap into something from a different. And so the story isn't necessarily that emotional telling a story as it is, the way you go about it. And I think that's what's different. I think that's what opens it up exponentially in terms of what the possibilities are versus 20 years ago or 30 years ago when, as a creative, you had an assignment, your job was to fill that space, whether it was a television commercial or an outdoor board or radio, and you told the story within that space. But now I think it really is the mediums that you choose, the technology that goes into them, the devices that become the whiz-bang that you get excited about, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there are other times when I think they come together and they can make you, it's both the story and the technique. As someone was talking about the Arcade Fire Wilderness Downtown video, the technology of that and the Google map is amazing. But at the end of the day, it's still a story about bringing you back to your childhood and all the sentiments that come with that. And that's very powerful.
But one of the challenges we face today is that that brand story isn't told, can't be told one way through one pipe, through one piece of content, no matter how beautifully crafted it is. I mean, you just go to Google or you go to Bing and you type in.
What's
you know,
Bing?
Bing's awesome. Check it out. Go to Bing and type in Nike, and there's the story. That's the brand story. It's a confluence of all the things that real people, are talking about when it comes to the brand. Now, part of it could be the advertising. Most of it, though, is the actual product experience. So as creative people, I think we have to recognize that, yeah, sure, brand stories are important, but we don't control them the way we did even 10 years ago.
Well, that's, I think, another part of that, and it's what you're saying, is that it's a conversation with pop culture. And it used to be that you tried to make that happen. Now it's going to happen no matter what. So you can put something out there, but people are going to respond, and the question is, what do you do next? And it has to be real time or as close to it as you can get, and it has to be still through the strategy. But having that conversation is what the brand becomes.
But you get paid by brands to create a certain kind of or facilitate a certain kind of a conversation. Isn't that true? I mean, do fans carry all the water now when it comes to defining a brand?
I mean, the original question sounded to me a little bit like a media question, and you know, how do you have this? How do you roll out a campaign, maybe, or how do you express a brand through all these various media? And I mean, to be honest with you, I think few people up here would argue that an incredible digital tool or app or property is probably more effective than a single television commercial. But the reality is that with a lot of big brands, the client does not see the campaign until they see the television. And that's just reality. So you can make the most amazing things in the world, and I'm not just saying stick to digital, but you need that layer of traditional over it, and that can be a great thing, and it can pour gas on the fire, but oftentimes it's necessary even to sell something through.
The problem is the process. I mean, TV still ignites, it still lights the fuse better than anything else. It will for a while, but it's a little like trying to teach your child to speak by just having them repeat the same thing over and over. Like, here's a slogan, kid, now learn to speak and learn to have a conversation. Like, you don't start with one-way communication, you start with two-way, and then you figure out how you're gonna do it. And the two-way is the dynamite. And all anybody's ever done to this point is lay fuses, and they've never been held accountable to actually blow anything up.
But we're talking about a lot about mass media, and we're talking a lot about digital. For me, this is reality. We're just starting the hockey stick on this curve now. But I think the real question in the future is what's going to be next. Are we going to talk about theater, movies, gaming, and all those other stuff that are really, really present around us, and that we really have to look forward in the future, because this is where the curve is going to happen, and the big surprise is going to happen.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think the role of all of our role really is to understand human behavior, both emerging and existing, much more than understanding technology. We're a digital agency, born and bred, and we don't ever start with technology. We always talk about who are we trying to talk to and what are we trying to say. And then the next question is, what do they want and how can we get that to them? You know, not how do we make you care about our brand, but what do you care about and how can our brand make that happen?
So that gets all the way back again to the difference between what was and what is. What was is you only had so many ways. You know, yeah, you've got a strategy, you've got something you want to say about the brand. Now you've got all these different vehicles to say it in. And I think that's the difference. It's like you can think it, it can be. And you know, at the end of the day, it still is. It's about what the brand stands for, and you know, finding ways of getting that across, and having consumers engage and say that's relevant. That's what I believe. That's what I'm engaged in. That's, you know, for me.
I don't think it's about saying things at all. I think it's about doing things and making either tools or utilities that make someone's life better through the brand or possibly that help them intersect with the brand. But people are sort of done with being messaged to, and hey, this is what we stand for. Check this out. You have to prove what you stand for by making shit that actually enables that in the real world.
Yeah, I don't think a brand is a story anymore in any traditional sense. I think a brand is the sum of its actions, and not the ones that it's chosen to articulate or chosen to take, but all of them, because everything's been made transparent. And so a brand is no longer the sum of its communications activities. It's the sum of its customer service activities, probably even more than its communication activities. And all of those, walls are down, and it's really about, organizations having to go through a process of breaking down the infrastructure. Part of what you're talking about needing TV is because there's 50 years of infrastructure built up around procuring TV. It's not just that people don't, I've spoken to so many CMOs, they all seem to really get it. But they've got some, marketing group in Kazakhstan who needs TV.
Or they have to walk it down to the CEO
or they have
to
to
justify their existence.
Exactly.
And it's like, where's the TV?
But wouldn't you agree that brand still has to stand for something, whether or not its message is what it stands for? I mean, I think that's where, at the end of the day, what this is still all about. Yeah, you may not come out and say, it's me pounding my chest, but I think that's some of the issues that we have to be able to still focus on.
I think stuff has to stand for something, but it has to do something that expresses that. Like if Best Buy, I'm not trying to be self-referential with our work, but with Best Buy, you could just run a commercial that says Best Buy has awesome customer service. Or you could create something like 12 Force, where we actually made it so that a consumer can send a text to any Best Buy employee, even if they're off work, sitting at home on the couch watching TV. Hey, what's the best VCR for, oh shit, I guess it's a DVD player. I'm old. What's a VCR? What's the best Blu-ray player for under $400? And you're gonna get these things back. And then it's cool to do a TV spot that drives to that and celebrate that, but that is a living manifestation of Best Buy has awesome customer service.
That's a great example of what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. But that's you guys did this amazing thing. It's a customer service division decision. It's an operational decision. It's not a marketing group decision. I mean, obviously it has to cross all of those things. And someday we should sit down and you can explain how you actually push that through. Because I run up against that doesn't fall within my budget thing all the time.
But this is a good example where creativity goes beyond marketing. It applies to every stage of the business, and I think in the future, from product design to customer service to marketing, creativity will be the major force in the future. And I think it's exciting for us because it's like when music changed a few years ago, now we're listening to more music than ever. And I think everything will change in the next few years, and we'll have more visual stimulation from brand exercise or whatsoever around us, and it will be amazing.
So let me ask this. If you have either a democratized brand experience or a lot of touch points that need television or some other way to bring them together, the brand is the sum of its actions, but those actions are now smaller and more finite than before. Who is guiding a brand beyond, and I'm going to assume that there's probably no CMO that's going to keep his job if he says we are just the sum of what consumers say.
Not say it, but embrace it. I mean, I think you need to embrace the fact that you don't really control your brand anymore. I mean, there was that example of Nestle on their Facebook page saying, hey, don't mess with our logo. And they just got destroyed. They got literally just eviscerated by people because you can't control it. You cannot control a group of people. And especially on Facebook, we say all the time, on your own website, you can say whatever you want, you can be whoever you want. That's where you can speak about yourself comfortably with your own tone of voice. When you go into somebody else's space, it's the equivalent for a lot of these brands of going into a party, changing the music, and then interrupting everyone and starting to talk about yourself. No individual would ever do that, I hope. I wouldn't. But brands do it all the time. They have no social graces whatsoever. And recognizing that if you are the sum of your actions and that people are going to point out your flaws more actively than they would with just another person, you have to embrace the fact that you don't you can't operate from command and control anymore. All you can do is try to be true to your brand values, and I agree with you that a brand has to have a set of values, it has to stand for something. But
And the point there is that people can see through a tagline. So if you're saying you believe in X, and you're meaningful because of Y, and then you're behaving a totally different way as a brand, people see through the bullshit and you lose.
So somebody's got to, somebody's got to manage like what the thing is that makes the brand, have a single kind of voice and a personality, and doesn't feel like it's a by committee. And you're right. Maybe it's not the tagline. Maybe it needs to be something like, "What's the brand's voice?" Or how do you articulate a certain kind of soul of the brand, so that when all these different partners are doing different things, they at least understand that there's something that pulls it all together. And what and I think in many cases it's the CMO or somebody within the client who's charged with that, because there's so many different partners now at the table. But the schizophrenic brand is the one that doesn't have at least somebody who's able to articulate something. Well, the brand talks like this. Oh, I get it. Whether I'm doing the digital or whether I'm working, for the client, at least I understand that that's how to carry it. That's a tough thing, but I mean, that's the successful and the great brands are able to, I think, understand that and promote that.
I agree with that 100%. I don't think, you got to have a strategy. It's got to be a brilliant strategy that has to come from the agencies and the brand itself working together. And then, you've got to have a point of view. And then once you do that, of course you're going to put that out there, and it's not announcement. I give you this. It's the beginning of that conversation. But I think that you absolutely have to have a strategy and a point of view, and that's why a purely crowdsourced advertising agency model is never going to work, because you need those things to be focused.
Yeah, and going back when you were saying you could have like the best brand manager, the best CMO on the table, but if you have to manage with 10 people that express your brand in different ways, that's a pretty hard job. But after that, after a clear vision of the strategy, I think we need someone who's in charge of the brand expression, and for me that's the creative. The creative are in charge of the brand culture and put the brand expression out there and follow that strategy. But it needs to have like one guy, not 10 companies doing different direction to prove that they are the best company. Right?
The danger with that is how you define expression. And if it's a loosely defined thing, great. If it's so tightly controlled, then you run the risk of chopping off all the other partners at their knees, because you gotta let them do what they do and be great at it. Because frankly, circling back around a little bit, your first question about creatives in general and having a creative culture, I think you can apply that, frankly, or you should apply that to the culture that surrounds all the partner agencies and the client. That broader team together needs to have a creative culture, and that creative drive can't just reside with one agency that has sort of anointed themselves the brand steward.
Right, there's too many services to be offered for anyone to be best in class at all of them, so everybody needs to learn this really new thing that hasn't been part of the industry. It's been part of my part of the industry, and to some degree, which is how to play nice in the sandbox with everybody else. Know what you do really well and do it, rather than trying to capture every single marketing dollar there is. And because you'll build better relationships that way, and it'll be sort of long-term value over cash in hand. So I couldn't agree more. I think it's about thinking more in terms of, I think strategy is creative. I think it's one of the most creative activities there is. So I don't make the same distinction that you do, but I think we're saying ultimately the same thing. We talk a lot about frameworks instead of processes. Because the world is moving so fast, a framework is elastic. A framework can be adapted. It just sort of nudges you in the right direction, whereas a process is extremely rigorously defined, and I don't think that a sort of process for how to execute communications against brand values is likely to stay relevant for very long, and then you may not have sort of schizophrenic communications for 3 months or a year, but the following year you probably will. So, thinking elasticity and, how do we communicate refinements and learnings? I think, a lot of it is about going from the sort of investment in the big blockbuster spot that is of most value the day it airs and then diminishes in value from that point forward to more of an investment model where you start putting a bunch of things out there and see what resonates and then double down on the ones that are working.
Well, I agree quickly, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna.
I love this.
I agree with you again. It's not just because you're handsome and charismatic, but I think that the strategy should be something that, and we've said there shouldn't be a distinction between creative and not creative, but I think if you look at what would previously be called a planner, and we call them cognitive anthropologists. We have fucked up names for everybody in the company. But if you take those people and you take creatives and you put them together and you make a great strategy, the key to working with all, and I also agree, don't try to do everything. You can do a lot of it, and it's good to have some consolidation, but invariably with these huge brands, you're going to have 1 million partner agencies. If you have a simple strategy that's based off of a true insight, those partner agencies will be able to execute and do what they do and what they're good at against that. So I think that's the key.
And I think that's where our value is because, the CMOs are getting, they'll talk about like, I've got more data and I've got more coming in than I know what to do with. Our job, I think, is to be able to say, well, this is what matters. That's the 6.5 seconds that matters, by the way. But that, this is really what you need to be focusing on. And somebody's got to be able to take the lead and show them the way. Like, you're getting hit, okay? You open the door and it's a tsunami. But we're able to boil that down and tell you something strategically based on that, and that strategy should become inspiration. That inspiration is what everybody should be able to work against, and it feels effortless even though it's not. And I think that's, and I'm speaking from a larger agency, that's the value that we bring, I think, is the ability to do those things and to think, it all has to lead to something in the end.
So, one comment to many. That was awesome. Different than one of the things that I struggle with so I sort of trying to put the CMO hat on here and collect the aggregate of what we've been told, which sounds like a brand needs a soul, it needs values, it needs a strategy, it may or may not need a story, and then it needs some way to now express that to the world that both is led by them but embraces the audience. And it's like, holy crap, right? That's a whole lot of stuff, and that's where I think this all, to me, starts to become. I worry that we're putting a lot on the backs of the CMO because he's not up here, and it's easy to sort of say, well, you should do all those things. Bring those in, bring in these multiple viewpoints, understand how to express all these places. And I'm like, we all have photos that we wish weren't on the web, and we're one person, right? We're gonna deputize employees, and then we're gonna deputize in some way consumers. And knowing that 1 or 2 bad comments has to be offset by 10,000 or whatever those stats are, I mean, is that realistic to do?
We talk all the time about the opportunity of negative experiences with a brand, and that those are now transparent and broadcast. That if you have a good relationship with a brand, but you don't feel passionate about it, what's going to drive you to passion? It's not just like consistently having. I have a friend who works on the client side, international digital, and for a CPG company, and he told me a story about how he's been buying the same brand of butter for 20 years, but he's never thought about it because it's butter. And then one time he got a rancid batch, and he knew, because he's in CPG, he knew where to look to give them all the information, and he emailed, no Twitter, nothing fancy, he emailed them and said, hey, just thought you should know, and they wrote back like this very human, like, oh my God, all anybody ever does is tell us to fuck off, and you gave us really valuable information, thank you so much, here's a year's supply of butter. And
all at once.
yeah, exactly. He's just bathing in butter, it's really greasy. But now he had a positive experience after a negative experience that he is now sort of a diehard fan of, I don't know if it was Breakstone or whatever, because they responded in a human way to an otherwise negative situation. And so it's not, don't make mistakes. That's unrealistic. The sort of glossy, perfect brands that have existed for so long aren't going to exist anymore because brands make mistakes more
But we've
than
increased,
individuals.
but
And I think
if we
it's a-
increase the number of brand representatives, the mistakes start, multiply. I mean, imagine Comcast has a guy who falls asleep on a sofa, right? Give every Comcast, guy a Twitter handle and deputize him to speak on behalf of the brand, and what comes next? I mean, can you? That's not rancid butter. That's not customer service per se. I mean, I'm just saying, like, now give consumers the deputization, and don't have somebody that's sort of driving or facilitating the message. I'm just curious. Is that a realistic response?
Yeah, I think it's honest, and we have to go this way because otherwise it's going to break. And I think the key for that is to go fast because consumer wants things fast a lot. And spending months and months trying to test a TV campaign and go to focus group and retest and blah, blah, blah. And then you go out there after 3-6 months, it's done, it's over. It doesn't work anymore. You have to go faster. So that's why the consumer want think fast. They want to respond. They want to talk. They want to express themselves about a brand. So let's not be too rigid. Otherwise, brand will break in the future.
I think it's laughable that we're up here talking about transparency like it's an option. I mean, you're whatever shit is going on with your brand, or it's gonna get out. I mean, transparency is a foregone conclusion with what's out there today, and the question is, what do you do about it? And the example here is a great example. We worked with Domino's. We had YouTube videos of kids that worked at Domino's shooting snot into the pizza. That's not part of the new formulation that we've had success with, by the way. But what we did was we had the CEO come on, immediately respond to this thing. It was like the next day we had a video up and running with the CEO. Also, we've recommended something like a Twitter aggregator that goes on a company dashboard or even as a public-facing, consumer-facing thing. And what happens is when somebody shit talks something, even on our website now, we have an aggregator that anything about Burger King or any other brand we work on will just come up in real time as it's happening. And some of it's like, oh, Burger King's awesome, and some of it's like, Burger King sucks. And when you hold that up to the world and you are Burger King and you're showing them, it diffuses the Burger King sucks comments so powerfully. So I think you have to embrace transparency because it's here. It's not something that you get to decide you're going to do.
And to Philip's point, this goes back to sort of the investment model and doing a whole lot of things really fast and not worrying about them being perfectly polished. I have this line that I say to my clients over and over and over again. It's never been cheaper or quieter to fail. So as long as you're learning from it, it's an incredibly valuable exercise. Because usually failing in the digital world just means nobody showed up.
Well, let's try three campaigns and see what's happening in 24 hours and remove 2. So
we prototype so many things and drop some off along the way and then put 4 or 5 things. And this is sort of what I think is a little bit of the fallacy of the big idea. I think big ideas are important in certain cases, but I think agencies have been holding on to it because it's kind of the last vestige that they can hold on to with their fists tight. Sometimes an aggregate of a whole lot of little ideas that circle in an authentic way the values of the brand are going to be more successful. And I think that's what gets to your point about letting the partners do what they do really well. Again, it's sort of it's iterative and collaborative rather than command and control top down. Why does there have to be a lead agency if everybody's working towards the same goal?
I think that's a cool point that the big idea is maybe changed to the big point of view, and from which your communications come from. And another important point, just based on this whole subject, is just we hear from clients all the time. We want to be real time. We want to be relevant. We want to respond to things as soon as they happen. And never, ever do they have the infrastructure that allows that to happen. And that's they want to, and we work with them and we try to streamline the process. But that's one of the biggest challenges I think facing a brand today is how can you respond when this is the way that pop culture speaks? Are you able to get your organization to a place, empower the right people, put a process in place that allows you to do that?
Yeah, there's so many catch-22s in business process. We have a client, one of our best clients, really forward thinking. They say, we want never before been done ideas, and we give them to them, and then they go to legal, and legal says, well, we need a precedent. And it's like, well, okay, there's nothing we can do in this situation.
So we agreed that there should be no lead creative agencies going forward. Perfect.
No.
All right.
We don't agree with that.
All right.
Not surprised.
You know, I think actually, I
Somebody's, so whether it's the lead agency or it's the client, somebody's got to still, be the keeper of, as I will say, it still has to feel like it's coming from one voice, and that the brand feels like it's a person and not like it's a committee. And, who's going to own that is a good question. I think an agency, it's the responsibility of an agency to be able to articulate that, especially if the client's not able to do it themselves. And whether you're the lead agency or you're just trying to play nice in the sandbox, it's better for the brand has got to be the thing that we're all working against.
But maybe in the future, the agency will be better at that point, and they're going to be good to manage their brand. And maybe advertising agency, we're kind of the middleman right now, and maybe they're going to get stronger and they're going to take over their business and they're going to do it.
I just saw Barbara Lippard said something about that today. Like that's a whole new industry for us to be the air traffic control and manage that. But I think that is kind of what we've been doing. It's just a matter of, does everybody understand the brand that works on it? Truly understand it? And what does it take to understand the brand? And say, well, that's not what they would do because it's not. Some people say, well, that's not what Taco Bell would do, and it's like, well, why not? And if you can't articulate it, then you're just saying something for the sake of saying it.
So actually, that's a great segue. Last question, I think. If in the future it keeps getting teed up, if you could blow it up and rebuild it right now, sounds like some of you are more likely to do that than others. What would be the big thing that you would change?
I'd abolish the term lead agency. Honestly, I think our industry, our industry has always been about meritocracy. The best ideas, the best talent, the best whatever. And when you get into this complacent mindset that there's a lead agency, then I feel like we're getting soft. I think that the agency supremacy should be constantly challenged, because at the end of the day, you always want the absolute best, not just the guy that was deemed lead. You always want the best talent, you want the best ideas, constantly in front of the CMO.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say that the best talent only works in the best culture. You have to have a culture that actually embraces collaboration internally, that we're not in the business of producing account services, so don't just put all the account services people together, because that's not your product. Put everybody who surrounds the output of the agency together to really empower them and give them autonomy to solve the problems at hand. That's how we work. We're cross-disciplinary teams, and a real focus on culture. That culture internally is going to be how you can adapt to culture externally. And to your point, we don't pay attention to what the big agencies are doing. We pay attention to what the real small up-and-comers are doing, because they're the ones who are going to be closest to the culture. We have our interns, have just as loud a voice as we're brainstorming and devising strategy as myself or my senior executives. We have interns who have come up with brilliant ideas because they are close to the culture. And I think meritocracy is great, but meritocracy is sort of a theory in a lot of, it's spoken, but it's not practiced in a lot of cases in bigger companies, because somebody's got tenure of 10 or 15 or 20 years that they have to be heard first. And I think that's got to be blown up, because sort of, at least for the time being, the closer you are to being completely born digital, the more native insight you're going to have into how people interact and what the behaviors are.
The first thing I think we should blow up is the building. Because if we want to attract talent, I think it's really important to open our doors to whatever the talent is in this world. And I think when you're 26, 22 years old, and you're creative, you have your laptop, your phone, and you're ready to go everywhere to enjoy and work on in great companies with great culture. And I think the fact that we're having those buildings and so many floors of different departments and so many silos with different companies, I think this is where we're getting fat and we're not fast anymore. And if we're fat and not fast, we don't die one day. That's for sure. So I say let's blow up and let's be small and let's be remote and let's focus on the talent, on the people.
If we get to blow shit up, I would like to blow up more than just the ad side. I'd like to blow up some of the client side as well. Because first of all, it would just be fun.
Let's blow up procurement.
But honestly, I think if you could just blow shit up and start over, you can't just talk about what's happening on the agency side, because invariably that is going to get sent over to the client side. And if there's not a process in place or a structure in place there that facilitates and buys the ideas and gets them to market quickly, it's a waste of time. So what I would love to see, and this sounds like fucking Willy Wonka, but I mean, I would like to see an ad agency client situation, or whatever we want to call ourselves, the creative and the brand sides have a system that was able to work really quickly and bring these tools like we talked about, utilities, applications, things that make people's lives more fun, more interesting, more better to market quicker. Because right now we're not in the business of, hey, we got to get to this idea before those guys do. We're competing more against startups. I mean, the kind of things we're making are business model changing things, and they happen really fast. And you could present an idea like Groupon, I mean, you could present that to a client and say, hey, what if you did a thing where you let consumers get on your website and get together and save money? Well, then they're going to come out with it and turn it into $1 billion business within 2 years. So that's the business we're in now, and it's competitive, and it's fast, and it's scary, and it's fun, and it's cool, and that's it.
So my turn to blow something up? I think I would blow up maybe what could be a trend that there's too much piling on, and everybody gets an opportunity to put their little spin on something. I think that, and that's both on the client end and that's on our end. I think, again, I'm gonna get back to like my belief that you gotta stand for something, you gotta have a vision, and I look at brands that have like their founders are still there, like your Apples and your Amazons and your Zappos, where it's like, this is what we stand for, because I founded this company with this vision, and everybody's gonna kind of follow that. And over time, brands that don't have founders and other people interpret it different ways and they put their mark on it, and then other agencies or partners can come in and they all put their little mark on it, it starts to lose its focus. And I think that so the watch out is, yes, you want to bring a lot of people to the table because you can get a lot of great ideas, but the caution is that becomes the schizo thing again, and that it's very important for brands to have that clear vision. So that's what I would blow up.
Do we have time to do Q&A, or are we gonna?
Who wants to blow stuff up?
Yeah. 1, 2 questions, and you're gonna have people raising hands.
Are you drinking a Coke Zero?
It worked.
Okay.
All right, we got time for 2 questions.
Is that a
For
question?
the cool Panasonic 3D.
Put my kids through college.
Why isn't there a woman on the panel?
Ooh. She dropped off. Actually, there was one. She dropped off.
She's actually doing work instead of pontificating.
Talking about the future.
Perhaps what you ought to blow up is an attitude about women in the creative departments of agencies.
That's true.
Well, we have, Chris Porter has had a reputation as a fraternity for a lot of years, but now with Old Navy and with more and more amazing, talented female across every department. I was going to say creatives, but I know you're going to lash out at me. I don't want that. But
I'll try to restrain myself.
And it's increasingly important. We've been working in a preliminary capacity for Vitamin Water, and you look at their business and it skews female, and we've got all these guys, and so they're saying, look, that's great, get a really senior, talented female creative on this business right now, or we're not interested because we want those insights. And so yes, I think it's needed and it's good and it's going to keep going.
Absolutely. I mean, we've gone from, in the early days when really it was only possible for the most part to hire geeks, or geeks were mostly male then, I'm not really sure what it was, but where we were, 10% female, 15% female, we've gotten much closer to 50-50 at this point, so I see a really positive trend there. I didn't invite people to this, and in fact, I was a late addition. I'm probably filling in for that female. So, I don't know what to say about why the invitations went.
But in 10 years from now, there will be more female because guys are lazy to go to school. So for sure, it's going to change the industry.
But there are insights, obviously this is just belaboring the obvious, there are insights that only a female can write competently about or think about or present about. And so I remember early on, before Crispin had hired a lot of female creatives, we had a little piece of the Victoria's Secret business, and the kind of ideas you got from guys were just like, okay, you open on a hot chick, and it just, it was embarrassing. So they forbid any male from working on the business because the stuff was so dumb. I'm not doing myself any favors here.
I think we're going to end on that note.
Thanks
That's it, right? All right. Thanks.